Welcome to the Legends of String Teaching podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Glawe, coming to you from Ann Arbor, Michigan. The purpose of this podcast is to sit down and interview legendary string teachers who have taught in our field for over 25 years and have great experience that we could all learn from. The L.O.S.T is presented to you today by the Michigan chapter of American String Teachers Association. Hello, this is Jonathan Glawe, and I'm sitting down today with Gabe Villasurda. Gabe Villasurda is a member of the Ann Arbor community where I live and teach in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He is a longtime string teacher in our field and advocate for music education and does tremendous work helping young string teachers these days become better at their craft. So welcome, Gabe. How are you doing?
Good.
Thank you so much for doing this, and I'm excited to try this new endeavor with this podcast. I wish you could quickly first just give me a brief background about your teaching experience and where you come from, etc.
Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, one block out of Detroit, and this is a school district with no strings. So even though I played fiddle when I was a kid with a private teacher, I never really played in a group. And so when I got to middle school, when instrumental music started in this particular town, I learned to play a wind instrument, the tuba to be exact.
Nice.
And had some really good teachers along the way there. And then restarted the violin when I got to university. So University of Michigan, a couple degrees. First teaching was in Patchogue, New York on Long Island. And then I came back to Ann Arbor and taught here a total of 16 years. But I had some years off when I taught in London at the American School of London. And then taught in Indiana at a private school, taught 1 year at Oberlin College, and then went to Hawaii to the Punahou School, which is the school where Obama was a student, although he had graduated by that time, and then stayed there for 12 years and spent 35 summers at Interlochen conducting.
Wow. Let's jump back towards the beginning of your career. You said that you have 2 degrees from University of Michigan, and in one of those degrees, at least one, you spent some time studying under Elizabeth Green, who obviously is the famous conducting guru. And can you tell us a little bit about your time there?
Well, I took every class she ever taught, including beginning violin, but after a while I passed out of violin too and went on to private lessons at that point. But I took conducting, of course, in undergraduate and a graduate level class in string methods and repertoire, and she sponsored my honors project and things like that. So yeah, she was something else.
So what was so inspiring working with her? Was it her passion for the music, her passion for the education part, or her sheer drive to just accomplish anything that was put in front of her?
Well, she was a passionate lady in lots of respects. She had proven herself in the public schools in Waterloo, Iowa, which I guess is your hometown.
It is my hometown, yes.
And came to Ann Arbor and pretty much set the string program here in Ann Arbor on its course. Taught at Slauson, Ann Arbor High School when it was downtown, and then began teaching university. And they purposely put all the music education freshmen in her class. We used to call her Ma Green, and she took us under her wing. And the nicest thing about the whole thing is that we took this class in Violin 1, but the real focus of the class was to become a teacher. And it set us on a course that stood us in great good later on, great benefit later on, because we were seeing everything that we did in our practice room, our theory class, our orchestra rehearsal, was focused toward teaching. And so there was no doubt where I was headed, and I just went with it. But she was something else.
So she was a very important part of your...
Very, very much.
Is there anyone else that you would say was a primary reason of why you went into music education?
Well, these wind teachers I had back when I was in junior high and high school recognized that I had certain musical abilities and gave me chances to teach coaching other kids. I was conducting the pep band when I was in the 9th grade and writing original arrangements of the hit songs of the day for the little pep band, doing all the transpositions and all that stuff. And so they gave me a baton at some point, and I was student conductor of the choir and the band, and I actually started my student teaching when I was 13.
Wow. Okay, so all this happens when you're very young, and they're very supportive of what you are. You said you played tuba, but you also had some violin skills. So I'll just ask this: as a string teacher starting in the tuba world, what did you learn? How did that work out in that training?
Well, I retained a certain amount of what I learned as a small kid, although my private teacher when I was 8 and 9, really didn't know where to take me much. And we just methodically went through a method book from cover to cover and then went on to a volume 2 of the method book. And in those days, the method books were pretty dry, and it was very unstimulating. But, of course, it all came back, as much as I could retain when I went into Miss Green's class, it was deep in my bones, and so it came back fairly quickly.
Right, so possibly your experience with the method books early on changed once you had a new perspective on how to use them in a different way, maybe. Yeah. So that is something that's a hot topic, the evolution of method books and the evolution of repertoire.
Well, in those days we had Merle Isaac.
Yeah.
And maybe Samuel Applebaum. Mm-hmm. And that was it. And, of course, the proliferation of those series nowadays is something to behold.
Right, and not to date you, we are talking 1950s
50s
and 60s. And,
you're right.
Yeah, okay. All right. So, you had this long year of teaching. How many years have you taught?
43, I
43
believe.
years.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you were to look back on your very first philosophy of how you wanted your class to be, and then write one on the last day that you were in school, tell me a little bit about how your philosophy of music education evolved and changed throughout the years.
Well, there are always these seminal experiences that form your pathway. I remember when I was in the university, and we were encouraged, the university hosted the Midwest Conference every winter. So we were encouraged to go to as many sessions as we had interest in. And I remember going to a session at the Michigan League, put on by a wonderful Detroit teacher named Ara Zerunian. And he only recently died, by the way, but he was an experienced and wonderful teacher in the Detroit public schools. He had brought 4 kids, age 12, to give a session on chamber music for kids. And I got to the session early, and here were these 4 kids. He was putting them through a last-minute rehearsal. And they were playing a movement of a Haydn quartet. And I couldn't believe that 12-year-old kids could sound that good. Mm. And as a matter of fact, one of them, Michael Uzunian, is either about to retire or has given most of his career to the Metropolitan Opera viola section. And the first violin is a doctor, I'm pretty sure. And the other kids all became very serious adult musicians of one kind or another. But I just began to scratch my head and ask myself, why is it these kids can achieve so much? There must be ideal circumstances in some way. So what are the ideal circumstances? What are the best practices that allows 12-year-olds to sound like a bunch of university kids playing beautifully? So that was one experience. And of course, after graduating from Michigan, I worked summers at Interlochen. When I first went up there, now on my way to my first job in Long Island, all these 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds are walking around playing Mendelssohn Concerto, Bruch Concerto, name it, right? They're all playing this wonderful repertoire. And again, it's ideal conditions. Somehow these kids are able to achieve that much. Now, what do I have to do as a teacher to get that kind of achievement? And so that's kind of set me on the path. I also remember hearing several high school orchestras, Ann Arbor High School, at that point only one high school, the Hillsdale Orchestra under Bob Lint, and the Midland Orchestra under Larry Gunther gave presentations at the Midwest Conference that were simply beautiful. And I couldn't believe that kids could sound that good. So, the rest of my life was all about scratching my head saying, what do I have to do to make these, to get that same kind of achievement? And I guess in the end I did.
Yeah, you absolutely did. I mean, let's see, when you were in Hawaii, you were there 12 years, correct? This is arguably, I guess Ann Arbor, you were here 16 years, right? What was the place where you felt you stayed the longest to make a lasting impact in regards to getting to that vision of creating outstanding musicianship by the end of your tenure there?
Well, the Ann Arbor experience was broken up in little segments because of my in and out to England. And so I was 11 years at Tappan, and of course that achieved a really high level of achievement too. So I figure that was a very fertile era. But when I was in Hawaii, I was there 12 straight years, and I did beginners in the 5th grade, and I took them, through graduation. And it was nice to see, getting the good teaching at the lower levels and how that could feed into the upper levels and how high they could achieve at the very top. So that was very rewarding.
In a place like Hawaii, there are resources around, but they're probably obviously not as many as on the continent.
Well, in a way, the fact that it's kind of isolated is a plus in some respects. And we had a full-scale professional orchestra in Honolulu, and there wasn't an awful lot of places for those people to go. I mean, my kids used to take lessons from the concertmaster, who was and still is a wonderful player, and they got the very best teaching from these professionals because these professionals didn't have an awful lot to do. They couldn't just fly, go and play gigs someplace, or it was hundreds of dollars of plane fare anywhere. So they were kind of isolated. And there was a really good youth orchestra in town conducted by Mr. Miyamura at the university, and they played very well. And my program supported their program and vice versa. So it was a very good relationship.
You miss Hawaii at all?
Yeah, the weather, this November weather.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about some of the stories of teaching. This is one of the things that I've loved about you being my mentor is that for every story I have, you have 2 or 3 that are similar that can make me feel like, you're not alone, kid. I've been through that as well. Do you have any stories that just stick out to you in your teaching career?
I always remember my very first gig in Patchogue, New York, and it was October or early November, and we had of the practice of either the band or the orchestra kind of playing as the kids came into an assembly. So there was a drama or something some kind of assembly on, and we sat down in the pit and played a song as the kids were coming in and maybe played them out. And it was a very small orchestra of just, 10 violins, a couple cellos, a bass, and 2 clarinets, a trumpet or 2, and a trombone, and a timpani. And we were playing a little piece, and that morning, the first trumpet came to me as I was doing my hall duty before first hour. His name was, I'll leave it out.
We'll call him.
Henry is his first name.
Okay.
And he came up to me and said, Mr. Villasurda, you have a problem. I have a cold sore today, and I'm not going to be able to play my trumpet today. And I thought, oh, my God. It's my problem, not his problem, you see. And I got on the phone and called the mother to bring the trumpet. Guess what? He played. But I say that's the very first gray hair I got. Every gray hair on my head has a name attached. And Henry is number 1.
I see.
But it came off okay. But I just realized that, things don't happen. You have to make things happen as a teacher. making things happen is what leadership is. I also remember when I was at Tappan, I used to pride myself on how the kids used to watch the baton. And I used to do lots of exercises for them to make sure that they would watch the baton. And even on a concert, I warned them, I'm going to do something different on the concert. Are you watching? Well, it was a district festival. And we were playing the little Merle Isaac arrangement of the Petrushka finale. And there's a long period of time when the woodwinds go do back and forth. It maybe lasts 40 measures. So it's clarinets against the flutes and bassoon and so on. And all of a sudden the strings come in. Bum, 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 bum. Well, I got lost. And I got to the end of that section, but didn't give the big entry for the strings. And so there was a pregnant moment of silence there, except for little Angela, who was absolutely correct and came in, even though I didn't give the beat. And what could I say to Angela? She was the only one who was right, and the rest of us were wrong. And I gave the beat one bar too late, and of course everybody came in, but Angela had already played her solo. But of course, in those days, we were recording on open reel tapes. So when I took the tape home, I cut out the 1 or 2 inches, pasted it back together, and we got a good recording out of it.
That's funny.
But, poor Angela, she was absolutely right.
So, okay, in moments like this, and we've all had them, I probably had 5 this past week, when you address the group the next time, you take ownership, right? You say,
oh, absolutely.
You say, this was my mistake.
Absolutely my mistake.
Yeah, and by doing that, you say, I'm here with you, and we can work through this.
That's right. I've actually performed that same piece a number of times at Interlaken subsequently, and I never made the mistake again.
Well, that is one thing.
Live and learn,
Yeah. So you've... One of the things that's very impressive that I appreciate about you is that you travel around our state and you help young string teachers. And, this is obviously very important to you, and we love having you as that resource. What are you seeing in the teaching profession today from the young teachers that you appreciate, and what are you seeing that you wish we could do more of to really enhance our teaching?
First of all, there are a number of young people out there who are doing a really good job. You probably know the names. So there are great people coming out who seem to be dedicated to the field of music education. They're not just out there temporarily until they can find a professional orchestra to do. They're really committed to kids and what kids can do. And that's so good to hear. It's so good to see. A lot of them have great personalities for teaching and learning and the ability to learn. So that's good to see. I think there are always growing pains in anybody's career, and it does take a while to know what to allow, what to let go, and what to fix, and how to take the kids from where they are to the next level up. And a new teacher is often just worried about crowd control and, the next performance and that kind of thing. And it takes a few years to get the longer perspective about where they are and where to take them next and where to take them after that. And so that they end up at the highest levels at the end. I just think that I keep asking myself when I hear a new group that I ask myself, what can I do to that group, with that group and that director to move them up one notch somehow? And knowing what that increment is and what to go at first, that takes quite a long time. And I'm very certain that some young people are going to turn out to be really good, and I just really wonder about some of the other ones who seem to be stuck where they are. You can go around the country and hear high school orchestras playing grade 2 music. And, that's really not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get kids. It would be the same as a school system offering trigonometry, but it really is a class in adding and subtracting,
Yeah.
It's not really where we want to be, or kids reading at the fourth grade level and graduating from high school. We really want them at the adult level as much as an 18-year-old can be. And knowing how to get the kids to the adult level takes some doing. I mean, it takes experience, but yeah, that's...
So there are some roadblocks that get put in the way of teachers, I guess, of my generation. Did you have some roadblocks along the way, too, that would stop you from getting those goals in regards to, the appropriate support from the community or not appropriate support?
I've been really lucky in my career. I've never really been in a bad situation. I taught in some schools that were very small, and so there was never going to be a 50, 80-piece orchestra to work with. And I taught in schools where there was a lot of turnover, so you might start a whole bunch of violas, and next year you'd have none because they moved away. So those kinds of things did happen. But I think I was able to elevate the playing pretty much wherever I went. And I guess that's really what you get paid for.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about your musical inspirations. I know I didn't prepare you for those questions, but I'm just curious, who are some of your favorite composers?
Oh, I love Brahms. I love late Beethoven string quartets. I mean, I actually like Mahler symphonies. In the last 10 years, I've actually grown to like Mahler.
Do you have any advice for, new teachers at this point? What are you hoping the string education world specifically looks like in 50 years?
Well, we've had quite a push with the Common Core and the teacher assessment and all that kind of thing that's come in the last 15 years or so. I will have to say that early on, we got a pretty free ride. Nobody knew what the hell we were doing, and we just did whatever we wanted to do, and nobody kind of complained as long as the concert sounded pretty good. Nowadays, you have to do all these hoops, you have to jump through all these hoops, and that's a mixed blessing, I think. I mean, the fact that it's taking time away from your main thrust is, of course, one problem. But on the other hand, it makes us accountable. I mean, the fact that there are high school orchestras playing grade 2 music is an indication is that somebody's not watching, somebody's not organizing the instruction in a productive way to get to, adult level stuff. And so I think that I had some great experiences. The band director that I worked with here in Ann Arbor in my early days was a very thorough teacher, knew exactly what skills needed to be taught at what level. So that the 7th grade band that he used to teach was so slow. He would take forever to cover 2 pages of a method book. So the 7th grade moved very, very slowly, and then when the kids got to the 8th grade, they could play anything. I mean, I had kids in orchestra in the 8th and 9th grade who could nearly sight read anything I put before them. So this is organizing instruction, right? This is knowing what has to be taught at early levels. So I learned a lot from that teacher, and I sometimes see among young teachers the practice of having an activity for its own use, for its own good. So let's do X, Y, Z together, and then now we're done with that, let's go on to a different activity. And of course it has no bearing on what kind of goals we're doing. It's just activity for its own sake, which is really an indication of unawareness of the concepts that need to get across, whether it's a listening concept or a bowing concept or a coordination concept or whatever. So it's not always clear that the activities are being productive. And, you can observe a teacher and notice the tricks the teacher uses, but if they're not relevant to what you're trying to teach, what's the good,
Well, Gabe, any last things that you want to share with us?
You hear a lot of school groups playing what I call second-class music, and it's almost a puppy mill of compositions that have very little musical value, and you can often go to a concert by a school group and you hear 3 or 4 of these in a row. Not even one master composer that is, Bach or one of those, Mozart or what. And so the kids go away with very little that they can take away for the rest of their life. I mean, I noticed your high school orchestra is playing some wonderful repertoire, and I've heard some already this year and other years. These kids are going to have that music for the rest of their life, and I just wonder whether something by Joe Schmo is going to have an abiding positive result on the quality of their life. And the publishers are not helping. They're just turning this stuff out. And I think teachers have a responsibility to go and delve into older arrangements and go to music stores and dig through the files to find stuff that has abiding, lifelong interest for the students.
Couldn't say it better myself. Thank you so much, Gabe, for sitting down with me today. Really appreciate it. I'm not here to plug anything at all, but I will say you do have a website. It is stringskills.com, and you can go and you see wonderful things there. Is there anything you want to say about that website? Great scale resources.
About to add more stuff to it, so stay tuned.
All right. Well, thank you very much for sitting down for the first edition of the Legends of String Teaching podcast. I'm Jonathan Glawe with Gabe Villasurda. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Welcome to the Legends of